I've always loved our school library. It's a place where I can escape into different worlds through the pages of countless books. One evening, I stayed later than usual, completely engrossed in a mystery novel. The school bell had rung long ago, signaling the end of the day, but I didn't notice. My parents were out of town, and I was supposed to stay with a family friend, Mrs. Henderson. However, she was unexpectedly called into work, and I figured I could manage on my own for one night at the school. When I finally looked up, the library was empty, and the clock read 9:30 p.m. Panic set in as I realized how late it was. I gathered my things and headed to the main doors, only to find them locked. The janitor must have locked up, not realizing anyone was still inside. My phone was dead, and I had no way to contact anyone. Resigned to my fate, I decided to spend the night in the library. I found a comfortable spot on one of the sofas and tried to relax. The quiet of the school at night was eerie. Every creak and groan of the old building seemed amplified in the silence. As I lay there, trying to sleep, I heard a faint shuffling noise. I sat up, heart pounding. I listened closely, but the sound stopped. Convincing myself it was just my imagination, I settled back down. But then, I heard it again, this time closer. I got up and looked around the library, trying to find the source of the noise. I saw nothing unusual, just bookshelves, tables, and chairs, all casting long, sinister shadows in the dim light. I shook my head, deciding it was just the building settling. Determined to make it through the night, I returned to my sofa. I picked up my book, hoping to distract myself, but the unease lingered. As I read, I heard the shuffling again. This time, it was accompanied by a soft, human-like voice. It sounds crazy, but I know exactly what I heard. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaky. There was no answer, but the sound grew louder, coming from the direction of the stacks. Gathering my courage, I walked towards the sound. I turned a corner and stopped dead in my tracks. There, at the end of the aisle, was something that looked like a figure. I can't tell exactly what it was, but I know that it was small, hunched over, and seemed to be muttering to itself. My breath caught in my throat. At this point, I just wanted to believe that it was my mind playing tricks on me, but I went ahead to confirm it. "Hello?" I whispered. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it slowly turned its head towards me. I couldn't make out its face in the darkness. Yes, I confirmed it. My suspicion was right. It moved. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of books. The figure vanished, as if it had never been there. I scrambled to my feet and ran back to my sofa, my heart pounding in my chest. I sat there, too scared to move, my eyes darting around the room. I think it's starting all over again. I heard that voice again. I still wanted to believe it was just my imagination or my mind playing tricks on me. But this time, it was as if the walls themselves were speaking. I covered my ears, trying to block out the noise, but it only grew louder. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence was deafening. I slowly lowered my hands and looked around. The library was just as it had been, but now it felt more sinister, as if something unseen was watching me. I decided I couldn't stay in the library. I had to find a way out. I grabbed my backpack and headed for the door, but as I reached it, I saw that it was still locked tight. Desperation set in. I started banging on the door, hoping someone outside would hear me, but there was no response. Exhausted and terrified, I returned to my sofa. I curled up, pulling my jacket over myself for comfort. Sleep eventually claimed me, but it was restless, filled with nightmares. When I woke, the library was filled with the soft light of dawn. I sat up, my body aching from the uncomfortable night. The fear of the previous night seemed almost silly in the daylight. I gathered my things and headed to the main doors, relieved to find them unlocked. A week has passed since my terrifying night in the library. I told no one about what happened, fearing they'd think I was crazy. But the incident haunted me. I couldn't concentrate in class, and I had trouble sleeping. The thoughts of my previous experience clouded my mind. It's been 23 years since my encounter. Whatever happened messed things up a little for me. I gradually lost the drive to read books like I used to, and my dream of becoming an author faded along with it. I just hope to completely heal one day. I am a big believer in the paranormal, and maybe this is the reason that I have had a couple of paranormal experiences. I was born in the Dune Valley of Uttarakhand, and there, during my childhood I saw a lot of rituals, which aroused my interest in the paranormal world. But after I moved out of the valley, my passion somehow got lost in day-to-day life, and I stopped pondering over such issues. But fate has kept some other plans for me. So, things took a turn after several years. At that time, I was working in a company and was posted in Gujarat. As required by my job, I had to stay in a remote village where I used to stay alone in a 3 BHK flat. It was there my lost passion for the paranormal resurfaced again. I started reading more and more about such things and got so engrossed in it that I never felt when things started changing. Now I was a changed person. I had lost my sleep. I had stopped eating regularly and I started losing weight. I used to stay lost in myself, but I couldn't stop reading about paranormal stuff. After a couple of days, I started feeling the presence of something near me. I couldn't explain it, but I used to get terrified whenever that thing used to come. I could see its apparition through the corner of my eye, but I kept on ignoring it. I thought my mind is playing games, and there is no such thing. It continued for some days. Then one night when I was sleeping, something happened to me. I was sleeping on my bed, and again I felt that presence. I was still in sleep, so I took out my phone and started an app for checking the magnetic field in the room. But before I could check the field, suddenly the books on the shelf started falling. I was shocked. I couldn't move. There was no earthquake or any other vibrations that could have caused it. That night I couldn't sleep. From the very next day, I stopped reading paranormal stuff. I stopped trying to contact the dead through Ouija board and started doing puja in my room. Things started improving after that, and again I started living a normal life. After a few months, I got transferred to Panipat in Haryana. Things were back to normal and I was happy. One day I had a chat with a friend of mine, and one thing led to another, and again we were discussing the paranormal. Now once again I was drawn into that dark world. When I came back, I started doing the same things. So again, the atmosphere of my new house started deteriorating, and I again came back to the same state from which I had somehow managed to escape. This time something even more terrifying happened to me. One day while I was asleep, I felt something approaching me. That thing whispered into my ears, "Parso," meaning day after tomorrow. I suddenly got up and was scared like hell. This time it was a lady who said this to me. At that time I couldn't understand what had just happened to me, as I was alone and all the doors were shut and there was no one except me in that room. Again I tried to convince myself that it was just a dream, but unfortunately it was not a dream. I met with an accident while I was riding, the day after tomorrow. The accident badly injured my arm and legs. Luckily I was wearing a helmet, otherwise who knows what could have happened. Now while I am writing this, I am afraid that it will all start again. Also I have moved to a new place, and this place hasn't still seen the dark side of my life. This incident occurred last summer when we were living in a duplex house on rent. My room was on the first floor, while my parents' room was on the ground floor. I have a habit of reading books late into the night, sometimes until 3 or 4 a.m. When we had recently moved in, I often heard the sound of anklets as if someone were walking in the compound. However, I usually dismissed it, thinking it was just a stray dog or cow, since our house had been vacant for more than 6 months before we moved in. My room tended to heat up during the summers, making it difficult for me to sleep, whereas my parents' room was cool and comfortable with a fluffy bed. One day, my father went on a business trip to another town, so my mom suggested I sleep with her that night, as we were the only two in the house. I agreed. Unlike my room, my mom's room received some light from the neighboring street lamps, so she didn't keep any lights on. It was pitch dark until my eyes adjusted to it. I went to sleep early but was abruptly awakened by body pain, the result of a strange and vivid dream. In the dream, I was not a participant but rather an observer witnessing a person being murdered and buried by others. When I woke up, I found my hands clenched so tightly that my fingers were sore, and I was sweating profusely. Curious about the time, I reached for my phone under the bed. It was 4:03 a.m. I decided to turn to my other side and noticed two shadowy figures of girls standing near the window, not outside but inside our room. One was on her knees, facing my mother, while the other stood behind her. Initially, I thought it was just a residual effect of my nightmare, but even after rubbing my eyes, the figures remained. When one of them looked directly at me, I panicked and woke my mother. By the time she woke up, the figures had vanished. I made a feeble excuse for waking her and tried to sleep again. The next night, I was back in my own room. Once again, I woke up at exactly 4:03 a.m., hearing children playing nearby. Assuming it was our neighbors, I checked my phone, confirming the time. Then, I heard footsteps coming upstairs. Terrified, I held my breath, knowing my parents were asleep downstairs and our neighborhood was patrolled by the police at night. Eventually, I fell back asleep. The following night, I was awoken at exactly 4:03 a.m. by the sound of someone thumping on my door, not knocking but banging loudly. I screamed in terror, realizing my mom wouldn't hear me over the noise of the fan in her room. I called out to my father, who rushed to my room, but when we opened the door, no one was there. For 3 consecutive nights, I woke up at exactly 4:03 a.m. and experienced inexplicable occurrences, leaving me deeply unsettled.